Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of our Let's Talk Arsenal series. Joining you, of course, midweek this week between Arsenal's game against Fulham at the weekend and the victory over Crystal Palace on Monday night. I'm very happy to be joined this Wednesday afternoon/evening by Mr. Charles Watts. How you doing, mate? You good? You well?
I'm very good, Tom. How are you getting on, mate?
Very good. You were smiling there. What have you said? You spotted something.
No, I was in the middle of typing, in the middle of putting out a tweet saying, "Join us now, we're live," and I was just laughing at myself, trying to do it slyly, but probably failing miserably.
It's all the facial expressions coming through. Yeah, lovely stuff. No, it's good to have you on the show, mate. It's good to chat because
Good to be
I'm
here.
missing you in the press lounge this season. It's slightly emptier without you. How are you finding being away from things?
Yeah, all right. I mean, honestly, it's been so crazy with the book stuff. I went away on holiday, got back, so I missed the first game. I was actually in the airport for the first game, flying back, and then since I've landed, it's just been, all sort of building up to the book launch next Thursday and stuff. So it's been just really, really crazy and mad. And so I think once the book's out and it's hit the streets and that dies down, then yeah, I think the sort of it might start to sink in a little bit more at the moment that I'm not doing all that stuff, but we'll wait and see what happens afterwards. But yeah, definitely missing you, mate. Missing you, missing our chats, missing everyone else, missing the food.
Yeah, the food is, I think, the thing you probably end up missing the most. A nice free meal at every game, but
It's nice.
yeah, and
It's
halftime
nice.
snacks.
Nice thinking
Yeah.
about matches about watching it in the stands, though. I have to say, and sitting back in my actual seat is going to be very nice.
No, I bet. I was going to say, when you're talking about kind of the pre-match stuff, if you had to pick one halftime Emirates snack, which one would it be?
From last season, the lamb kofta things, but from
Yeah,
probably
they
before
were
your
good.
time, they used to wheel out the samosas every so often, and they were banging. They were so nice. So I used to nick as many of those as I could, but they've stopped doing that for some reason. But yeah, the
Yeah,
lamb.
now it's one per person now. So it's like I see Charlie Willard from Haters like sneaking in and grabbing like free whatever he can
They were
find.
hot. They were hot on those lamb koftas last time. They were literally
Yeah,
policing it. It's like one eat, one
yeah.
only.
I saw someone take off their hoodie, so they went up with a different outfit so they wouldn't get caught. That's how like intense
That
people
was
wanted
you,
these
was it?
No, of course not. Of course not. Wearing my Arsenal hoodie in the press lounge, getting told off by James Bench. That's how it works. But we're here to talk about, as you mentioned and alluded to, your brand new book, Revolution: The Rise of Arteta's Arsenal. I want to direct people to a Bergkamp Wonderlands and Chris's conversation with you, because in that talk, Chris asked you a lot about kind of the process behind the book and things about the writing process of it and things like that. So I don't want to go over things that people can listen to elsewhere and get even more content in that way into their ears from you. So we will kind of skip over kind of the processes of it and go into more of kind of the content wise and what the inspiration, like why Arteta, because obviously you covered Arsenal for a long time. Previously, of course, covering Reading, I want to say it was previously
Reading,
before
yeah,
that.
Reading.
And what was it about Arteta being the reason to spark him being the topic of inspiration here?
Well, just the results, really. It was basically, I mean, it is about Mikel and the work he's done, but it's also about Arsenal and the journey from sort of 2019 to where they are now. So obviously this young, vibrant side that has built this incredible atmosphere at the club, that has formed a relationship with the fans that had been totally broken just a few years earlier. So, had obviously Arsenal not been on this journey that they are now and been competing for the titles and have basically transformed themselves in such a short space of time, the book would have never happened. And so obviously it was about Mikel, but a large part of that was obviously down to results and what we've all seen and witnessed over the last couple of years and the dramatic sort of change in fortunes and, on the pitch, but off it as well, as this club that was basically on its knees not too long ago, and there was no relationship with the fans. Really, it was not a great place to go and watch football every week. You were kind of doing it out of loyalty and your connection with Arsenal, but you were, more than anything else, it wasn't like you were going every Saturday going, I can't wait to go to the Arsenal to watch this, because the atmosphere was so bad. There was, such a split in the fan base, and people were fighting, and now suddenly we're in this big connected environment where everyone at the club has come together behind this young team that's been built by this young, impressive manager. And yeah, that is the kind of birth of the book, really.
He's really, I feel as though, he's enigmatic in the way that he inspires so many different thought process. Because from a journalist point of view, and we've both been in those press conferences where he can come across, so cold at times in some of his answers. You've dealt with obviously other coaches as well, but what did you feel about Arteta coming in and how he addressed things in that first press conference so infamously? He set the principles, set the standards.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's only a couple of examples in his entire 3.5, nearly 4 year tenure at the club where I feel he's deviated ever so slightly away from the. He's made a little bit of an error. I remember the Willian thing, like he went away, I think, and went to Dubai or something like that, came back and then still played. But then the Aubameyang situation obviously was treated kind of differently. But I think besides like these off little errors here and there, he's stuck pretty darn set to what he said when he came in. Do you feel as though that has been the bedrock of his success at Arsenal?
Absolutely, and he's not, and the fact that he's never really veered away from it, I think, is so integral to the success that he's had. And I was there at that first press conference at the Emirates in the media room, and it was. I remember walking out at that press conference as a journalist, but as a fan as well, which obviously, you kind of work, and as well when you're sitting in these things, and you got your work head on, and you're doing it as a journalist, but as a fan as well, you want to hear stuff that you want to hear as a fan, and be impressed by something. And I remember coming out of that press conference and just thinking that was brilliant. That was so good. That's exactly what I wanted to hear from my manager. And it was so impressive, I thought, and it was a clear message. I talk about this a lot in the book, actually, this first press conference, because it was and it still is now. It resonates so much in terms of what we've seen happen since then. And, Arsenal at that time, as I sort of described in the other earlier, was on its knees. Just a few days earlier, Arsenal played Manchester City, and Mikel was sitting in the dugout for City next to Pep Guardiola, and City had breezed to a 3-0 win. It was 30,000 people in the Emirates. There was red seats everywhere. There was no atmosphere. Everyone, again, as I said, had just turned up. Those who had turned up just because it was Arsenal, and it was like, oh, I've got to go. It's out of loyalty more than anything else. But it was, and he spoke about how he sat there and he was so sad by what he'd witnessed and how the atmosphere and the environment was at the club. And he knew that if he was going to have any success coming back here, he was going to have to reconnect that fan base and get everyone believing in the team again and excited to be part of it again. And he spoke about that in that first press conference. He made a big point about it. He's made a big point ever since. And I thought even at the end of last season, when he was asked, how would you describe the season? One word. And he thought about it for so long. And this is actually in the introduction to the book. And he thought about his response for over 20 seconds in that press conference, just after City had won the league and Arsenal had lost at Nottingham Forest. And he just came up with, connection. That's how I sum it up. And I thought it was a really good answer. And that word has been so heavily sort of intertwined in everything that he's done since he's come to the club. And it's played such a huge role in taking Arsenal to where they are now.
What do you think his relationship with the press has developed like over his time? Because Arsene Wenger built up in his early time, a really kind of camaraderie style relationship, and then things frayed somewhat. I think towards the end of his time at Arsenal, Arteta can be and can give some really good answers, I feel like, in press conferences and things like that. But then even as recently, I think as after the Crystal Palace game, you probably saw the video that went viral of his response where he was like, very good game. That was like it from his answer. How do you feel like his relationship with the press developed over those 3.5 years or so?
It hasn't really developed. He just that's it. I mean, the amount of times we sat at London Colney at the end of a press conference, looked at each other and thought, what the hell are we going to get out of that? It's just nothing. He just comes across a lot of the time that he just, he doesn't really care. He's doing it because he has to do it. And he can, like you said, when he really wants to talk about something and he talks about it, he delivers some really great stuff. But his main thought is just about the team. It's about his players. It's about winning. The press is just the press. It's something he has to do twice a week, whatever, and he'll do it. And sometimes if he's in a bad mood, he'll do it very badly. If he's in a good mood, then it'll be slightly better. But I just don't think he cares too much about the press or the media or how he's perceived by journalists. His sole focus is on the team, and I think that's what's so impressive about him, and really in terms of how he operates. He just, outside noises, he just doesn't care about. All his focus is on the team, what he does every week in the training ground, improving players and getting results. And we've reaped the benefit of that over the last couple of years as a football club.
Yeah, and obviously from a fan perspective, because going and covering the Arteta's tenure as journalist, but also then reacting to it as a fan, it has felt like he's breathed life back into the club during that period. I think we've used that term a few times already on this show. But what do you feel, if you could pinpoint one kind of key thing he changed? Was it something to do with recruitment? Was it his philosophy that I think established and became more apparent over time? It wasn't immediately apparent the style that he wanted to bring in, from my perspective at least. What would you pinpoint as that key turning point from him as a manager in turning Arsenal into what it is now?
I think he's just restored belief in the club. I think no one really believed. You just start every season thinking, maybe top 4 and stuff, and it was just that whole feeling around the club, wasn't it? It was just, there was no real belief that they could ever do anything. But now fans believe again. They believe in that they've got a chance of competing for the very top, for competing for the Premier League title, even this season, for potentially having a go for the Champions League. And just wind the clock back a couple of years, there was no belief. Wind the clock back to when Emery was in charge, or the end of Wenger. There's no real belief that the club was going anywhere. He arrived at the perfect time, and I don't want to criticize Unai, because Unai was a really nice guy, and I thought anyone would have struggled coming in replacing Arsene. But where Arsenal were when Unai left, they needed someone just to come in, scoop the whole club up, have a really firm direction about where he wanted to take it and how he was going to do it. And in Arteta, they just got the perfect person to do that. Someone who believed in themselves, who would never move away from the sort of targets that he set and how he wanted to do it. Even in the dark times, and there were dark times, there were really difficult times when he first started in those first couple of years, where the club could have easily booted him out and he wouldn't have had any complaints, because the results weren't great. Well, they weren't great, they were awful at times, especially in that build up to Christmas, in his first full season. Was it? Yeah, the first full season. And he wouldn't have been able to have any complaints, but he still believed in himself and believed in what he was trying to do. And even though it was difficult and there was tough times, he never wavered from the belief that he was going to get there in the end. And so, yeah, I think I was thinking of one word or one way of what he's changed massively and brought to the club, it is just that feeling of belief now that they are back capable of doing what this club should be capable of doing.
Did you ever have a wobble in your view of him as what he might be going forwards? I know I did. Mine was after Villarreal was getting in that Europa League semi-final. I was like, I don't know how forward from here. Another 8th place finish out of Europe to a team managed by our former coach. I really struggled at that.
I was more earlier on in that season, the build up to Christmas. I was wobbling more when, I think they're 15th when I always remember the Everton game, and I talk about this in the book as well, when they went at Goodison Park and they lost 2-1, and Willian, for the first half, it was one of the most embarrassing performances I've ever seen from a professional footballer in the first half. And I just thought, where are they going from here? And I remember I asked Arteta in the press conference, it was via Zoom then, because we were in closed stadiums. And I remember asking Arteta in the presser afterwards on Zoom, you wouldn't be able to complain, really, could you, if you get sacked about this? Are you worried about it? And he said no and all that. But I remember driving home from Everton that night, miserable as possible, coming back on a late. It was a day, I think, that London got plunged into a new sort of Category 4 zone for COVID as well. It was just a horrible time. And I just remember thinking, where are they going to go from here? But then that next game, it was Chelsea on Boxing Day, and Smith Rowe came in and Saka came in and Martinelli started. It was the first time Arsenal started 4 teenagers or something like that in years. And suddenly Arsenal beat Chelsea, and you saw this new look team suddenly emerging out of it. And from then on, even Villarreal was massively disappointing at the end of that season, but you could see that things were beginning to change. The youngsters were coming in, and I just felt a lot more belief, even though they finished 8th in that season. And I think they finished did they win 5 games in a row in the Premier League as well that year, despite the Villarreal exit? And so, my wobble was more.
We pushed for the Champions League, didn't it? That run in the second half of the season, I think the form was, I mean, compared to the first half of the season, was just light years in comparison.
Yeah, and it was brilliant. And it was, had Smith Rowe at the heart of it. I remember just after the Chelsea game, Arsenal went to West Brom and it was snowing, and The first half was just so good. There was so many, Smith Rowe and Saka were linking up, scoring brilliant goals, and you could just see that what he was trying to do and the vision. And whereas in that lead up to Christmas, when the results weren't coming and he was scrambling around trying to find something that worked, I just remember thinking, he might go here. And but one thing I didn't ever wobble on was I knew that I never thought the club would do it myself, because I knew that the club really believed in him still, and the players really believed in him still. I never got that impression as when we were around the squad in the changing room when Emery was there at the end. You knew that he was a dead man walking. You knew he'd lost the changing room. You could see it. I was at the open training the 2 days before he got sacked, and I felt really sorry for him. He just looked like really lonely. The players weren't talking to him. It was, that relationship had broken completely. But you never got that impression with Mikel. Even when the results were bad, you still felt the players believed in him and what he was trying to do.
Just quickly, is my mic sounding okay? I can see the chat box is telling me something went wrong.
It went a bit wrong, but it sounds all right now.
I can never tell. You're one of you falling now into the category of guests that don't tell me. Like, because I find that I have two types of guests. One type of guest is immediately will stop and will be like, "You sound odd," and the other one is a saboteur, and you fall into that list of people. No, we're just gonna let him sound like Optimus Prime now forever. But no, that's brilliant. We sorted it out. The chat box are there. I was going to ask as well, because obviously I talked about the wobble there, and I think you summed it out well where yours was. How much does kind of the fan online, in particular, the fan view of him feature in the book? Do you tackle kind of that, the dichotomy of what was so, in some ways, supportive to a fault, and in other ways, really wanting him gone to an Arsene Wenger outstage level at one point?
Yeah, I'll talk about it a bit, about the sort of online reaction to him, and the fact that I sort of wind that into the fact that he was quite fortunate in that run, that it was behind closed doors football. I think there would have been a lot more pressure on the club to act had he been, have 60,000 people at the Emirates every game seeing Arsenal lose and fail to score and lose at home to Burnley and things like that. That ultimately is what cost Emery his job, was that they could just see the fans had lost patience. They weren't turning up for games. There were empty seats everywhere. And had that happened to Arteta as well, then they might well have been more inclined to pull the trigger and get rid of him. So I think he was quite fortunate in that regard, the sort of timing wise. And I do sort of mention that how the online reaction was very, very strong at that point. But then I also think you always have to just take a little bit of step back, don't you, when you're gauging online views, because the people who shout the loudest online, you obviously hear that view the most. But the people who don't, the sort of silent voices, are still the majority of it, but they're just not saying anything. And it's just the ones you hear are the few who are just really loud and vociferous in their complaints. And you've got to take their views into account. It's football's opinion, but you also have to remember, I think, that the silent majority, the ones who aren't really saying anything, are they are the majority.
Yeah, I noticed this with Kai Havertz recently as well, because the live show we did a couple of weeks ago, we did like a whole audience check on whether they thought he had a good game against Nottingham Forest, and we said cheer if you think that he did, and cheer if you think that he didn't, and no one made a peep when we said about if you didn't think he had a good game. And I think that maybe that there is something to be said about the silent majority, and perhaps the Emirates crowd perspective of it as well, and I think that crowd perspective is something that Arteta has certainly changed. You talked about belief a lot. I think the connection between Arsenal and its fans, both and online, and we talked there about kind of division, but I do think there is wholly a support of Arteta now, even online. I mean, it's a very small minority that aren't still on board with him. But in the stadium and games, I went to America early this year. It's amazing seeing kind of the connection between supporters and this club now. And it's not just Arteta, but he is without a doubt the biggest force behind that change. And do you feel as though, or did you foresee him being kind of this lightning rod, if you like, of change for the fan side of things in particular?
No, not really. I mean, I hoped he would be, and he talked a good game when he first arrived. But obviously, I think the main thing is you've got to get results. If you don't get results, then you're not going to be able to create this new atmosphere and be the kind of lightning rod for this for what we've seen so far. But I mean, the change in atmosphere has been incredible. Last season was the best season I've ever sat through at the Emirates, but by a mile, atmosphere-wise, is completely different to what we've seen. I think post-COVID, we've got there's a younger crowd. I think there's definitely been a change in the sort of demographic at the Emirates post-COVID. But on top of that, Arteta has worked so hard. You just think of like North London Forever. He was he played such a huge part in that. He'd been wanting a song, he'd been pushing for a song, and then sort of everything combined perfectly for this song to suddenly arrive and suddenly become a bit of a social media phenomenon. And then Arteta was just on it, pushing the club. We've got to do this. We saw it. You could see it in the All or Nothing documentary, couldn't you, when he talked about it and all of that stuff. Even the Ashburton Army, he really wanted that sort of thing in the stadium. And whereas other managers sometimes might not have really been bothered about that, he knew how important that was. And again, you go back to that first press conference when he spoke about the crowd and the fans and how that was so essential, getting them back on board. So any success Arsenal was going to have, and so that plays a big part in the book as well. Like I speak to Raymond over at Red Action, on various things throughout the book about how things have changed in the atmosphere and Arteta and just everything on that. And I think it's such an important story. The fans over this last 4 years, obviously the team, the players, the youngsters who have come through. The results, Arteta, but I think the fans as well. Everyone has played a part in getting Arsenal to where they are now and changing the outlook at the club from what it was just a short time ago.
We're going to open the floor up in a second to some of the listeners. Not too many questions, though, because if you would like to ask Charles a question, what you need to do is attend the live event that Charles will be doing on the 31st of this month at the Tollington, if you would like to and are available and are in the area. Charles, why don't you tell the people all the details?
Yep, as you can see on the screen there, if you're watching, Thursday 31st, which is launch day, of course, we're putting on a big launch night stroke party at the Tolly. It's going to be, I think it's Stoke Newington Bookshop are coming down, so the books are going to be on sale. You can buy the books. I'll be there signing them for a couple of hours from 5:15 kind of onwards, and then we're going to have a little break to do a Q&A type in conversation part of the night where there's going to be myself, there's going to be Gunner Blog, James McNicholas and Sam Dean from the Telegraph, who are all going to be as part of the panel, talking about Arsenal, talking about Arteta, giving insight into what it's been like during Arteta's time, and answering questions from all the audience there. Hopefully, if there is any audience there, which I really hope there is, so please do come down and join in that. It should be a really fun night of Arsenal chat. So yeah, please do, if you are in and around the North London area or the London area and you want to come down and talk all things Arsenal, then come down and join in with me, Sam and James on hopefully what should be a great night.
Yeah, I'm really hoping to get there. I'm down to work that day, but I'm hoping to be able to get down at some point. So fingers crossed, listeners, make sure that you're getting down. I know that feeling of, hoping people go. When we did our live show a couple of weeks ago, that fear when you're waiting around for the room to kind of fill up, and it does gradually, and it does. You're always in your head thinking, no one's going to be there when I walk out. No one's going to be there.
I've got that fear. I've said this before. I've got that fear. Those sort of sad stories you see on social media that like the Sun or the Mail pick up on it will go viral of some 6-year-old kid who's invited 30 of his classmates to a birthday party and none of them turn up, and his mum takes a picture of his kid sitting on his own at a table with a party hat on, looking glum, and then celebrities get involved on Twitter, posting pictures to him saying, "Oh, stay strong, Dave." Will and offering their support. I've just got visions of me sitting there at a desk with about 20 books piled up high, and then like my dad standing next to me. and that's
well,
it.
I mean, as you say, it doesn't say there's going to be too many books. How many books do you think you're allowed? Because people are going to have to get down there quick to get hold of one.
Oh well, yeah, I don't know. It's not. I don't know how many is going to be available, but I think there should be plenty.
First serve, people.
Like I said, Stoke Newington are going to bookshop a kindly part of the night, and they're going to be down there with plenty to sell. So, yeah, hopefully there'll be plenty on offer. And if you've got one already, you've pre-ordered one and it arrives before you leave for the event, then bring that as well, and I can, I'll quite happily sign that as well.
I've got these videos. I don't know if you've seen the film National Treasure. The second one where Riley Paul is sitting in the bookstore. He's doing the book about the Templar treasure, and this very attractive woman comes up and is like, "Oh, are you the guy that found the treasure?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm the guy that was with the guy that found the treasure." it's very amusing, but no, I'm sure it's not going to be like that in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, make sure you get
I'm dreading signing the things. My handwriting is so terrible, like terrible. From 20 years of writing shorthand, I can't write anymore. Genuinely, I can't write. It just is this weird sort of squiggle type stuff. And the thought of having to sign things and write messages, I'm like, oh my God, that's terrifying me to my very soul. I'm so bad.
You're going to have to do a Bart Simpson at the start, practice your lines on the chalkboard, your signature. It's going to have to be...
My 7-year-old son writes better than I do. And yeah, that's going to be a struggle.
Maybe you can bring him along and he do the signing instead. That might be a strategy.
That could well be the way to go.
Let's jump into the chat box then. Rand says, can you buy the book outside of the UK?
Well, it depends where outside the UK. It is going to be on sale. It's going on sale in the US, I think in November, so slightly late. You can certainly buy it in Ireland, and I think they're still in discussions with the sort of foreign retailers about how it's going to be sort of sent out to Europe. So yes, you can in certain areas and hopefully in more areas, but it's kind of in the process of being sorted out at the moment.
Good stuff. Matt Robinson says, is it going to be available as an audio book?
It is. Yep, it's already there. You can already pre-order that. Not with me talking. I decided I would ruin it. I would ruin it. I'm rubbish. I'd be reading it. It'd take me about a year to record it. So I thought, no, let's get a professional to do it, and rather than me. But you can, yes, it is coming out on audiobook, yes, on the 31st.
Fair. If you could have had, I don't mean this to be disparaging the person that's reading it, but I'm sure they do a brilliant job. If you could have any one dream person that could have read it, like, who would you have gone for? I know Arsene Wenger read his own book, so
that would be good. Arsene Wenger, that would be nice. God, are you talking about Arsenal here?
Anyone you like. It could be like an actor that you like as well.
Denzel Washington. Denzel. Yeah. Maybe Denzel. Yeah. Or Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman, there you go. How dramatic would that be? Morgan Freeman talking about...
Imagine that on the cover. Voiced by Morgan Freeman. Rise of Arteta.
Just imagine Morgan Freeman talking about Arsenal losing 2-1 at Everton in December in the dark depths of COVID times.
That would be brilliant. Paul says, was there one game where it suddenly all clicked for Arteta and he knew he'd cracked the Arsenal puzzle, or is it still an ongoing process?
Well, in terms of if he feels there was one game, I don't know. That would be one for him. But I look at it and I kind of go back to the Tottenham game at the start of 21-22, wasn't it? When we'd lost the first 3 games of the season, been bottom of the league, and then the new players came in, they'd edged that game against Norwich 1-0 that they had to win. Then they went to Burnley and won 1-0, and then it was Tottenham. And Tottenham had won their first 3 games of the season. Arsenal had lost them. They were top of the league. Arsenal were bottom. And then we went into that North London derby 2 games later. They'd lost 2. We'd won 2. And that first half, that first 45 minutes, Arsenal absolutely blew them away. Saka, Smith Rowe scored. I think by the end of full time, all 6 summer signings, Arteta's signings, were on the pitch at full time, and Ramsdale was in goal. And it felt like this is it. This is a new team. This isn't Emery's team, really. This isn't Wenger's team. This is the birth of a new Mikel Arteta team. And I always look back at that match as the one where it all sort of clicked. And from then on, there's been little downs, obviously, but from then on, really, it's just been sort of up the whole way. So yeah, I look at that game.
Absolutely. It's a really key one. Daniel says, how much would we struggle, do you think, if Arteta was to leave for another team?
A lot, but I do think that the foundations have been put in place for Arsenal to be very, very strong. Obviously Arteta is the manager, but Arsenal put together a really good team behind the scenes that plays a huge role in this success that Arsenal have enjoyed. It's not just about Arteta, far from it. And Arsenal were a bit of a mess behind the scenes for a long time, and now I have a lot more confidence that team with Edu, Richard Garlick, Vinay, all that lot. I have a lot more confidence that should Arteta go, which I hope he doesn't, but should something happen and he ends up going, that the club would be in a good position to attract another excellent manager to continue on the really good work that Mikel's done. But it would be a struggle, no doubt about it. If you lose someone like Mikel Arteta, you're going to struggle, no doubt about it. It'd be a major, major blow.
Yeah, I really struggle to think who on earth you bring in to kind of replace him. I suppose what a manager or a coach like De Zerbi has done is show people that you can find gems of coaches from outside of the major leagues to come in and do a really good job in the Premier League. I'm interested to see how Iraola goes on at Bournemouth this season as well after coming in from Spain. So yeah, we'll see what happens, because one day he will move on. It's inevitable that one day it will happen. It's not Wenger joining us, for the last stint of it. I say last stint, it was 22 odd years, but it's Arteta at the beginning of his career. And I think he did an interview with Marco recently where he talked about the fact that he'd have an interest in managing in Spain maybe one day and doing things like that. So yeah, it will come to an end at one point. We've had some suggestions for potential readers. Unai Emery's a favourite of Patrick's to read the book. Holdini says Unai Emery as well, and Daniel Roberts says Peter Drury would have been great to read the book also. We got a question from Forever Gunner, who says, what is your expectation for the season and Arteta? And I'd also ask you to kind of define what that word expectation kind of means, because it's something that I toil with the listeners quite a lot.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? I mean, what is the expectation? Obviously, you want Arsenal to win the title this season, but if Arsenal finish second to Manchester City this season, it's certainly not been a failure. You're finishing second to the best team in the world and against the best manager in the world. So, the expectation is just to build on the success that Arsenal enjoyed last season and continue to build on that. And if that means a title, fantastic. I'd absolutely want to see them again push City all the way. And I would really like to see not most importantly, but I would love to see him go deep into the Champions League. Yes, it's the first season back for a long time, but I still look at that Champions League and think Arsenal got a really good chance of having a good crack at it, should the draw be nice. But even if the draw isn't nice, there's no one I don't really fear, in terms of who they might play. I think the one big question mark still hanging over Mikel is his ability in Europe, because let's face it, it's been pretty poor so far. His record in Europe, in knockout games especially, is not great. It's pretty rubbish. And so he needs to be able to prove that he can do it in the Premier League and in the Champions League, and he can balance the two together in terms of domestic and European football. So yeah, I'd say expectation wise, certainly to push City all again, hopefully go one better and actually get past them this time, but also to have a good go in the Champions League.
Yeah, I agree. It's a real something about the opportunity that the Champions League brings. It's such a massive opportunity, I think, for Arsenal, because teams can get knocked out, randomly. Man City, is Inter Milan in the final this season. If Inter Milan are getting to the final, you'd have to think that Arsenal are certainly capable of getting there, as well, depending on the draw that they get. And we'll hope that it is kind to us, and we're not getting Man City in the quarterfinals. That would be, ideal. But let's see what Arsenal are really capable of in that competition this season. We're going to bring it to a
by the way, we're definitely getting Bayern Munich in the Champions League this season. They're Harry Kane.
Yeah, but I feel like it's different now, isn't it? Like, it's not going to be the 10-2
no,
the last.
It better not be, or I'll be there with an Arteta outside if that's the case.
I can imagine that placards.
No, I can just imagine. I just know it's going to be Bayern Munich again this season. It's just written in the stars, especially with Kane going there. The last game was against Bayern, and I'm utterly convinced we're going to get them again and come up against that.
You think in the group stage? Because obviously they're pot 1, so we'll be pot 2.
I just think it's written in the stars. We'll find out next Thursday. And that's actually for the book launch night. I think the draw's in the evening. So we're also they're going to have that on the screens in the Tollington as well. So come down and watch that just to add even more drama to the night.
Lovely stuff. Charles, we are going to round things off there. Again, I do want to plug everything in its pure form. As Charles mentioned there, Thursday, the 31st of August from 4 p.m. at the Tollington. If you need directions, Google it. It's really easy to find if you've never been there before. It's literally the pub by the stadium is what it is. So, but it's literally a stone's throw from the Emirates. If you're not aware of where it is, I'm sure that the 99% of you are. Doors open at 4 p.m. Charles will be signing books from 5:15, and there'll be a Q&A with James McNicholas, aka Gunnerblog, and Sam Dean of the Telegraph as well, and plenty of cool fun chats, photos, and all of that with drinks and refreshments. Of which, have you, in the time since recording with Chris, worked out the difference between them two words yet?
No, it's forever going to be a mystery. I think the difference between drinks and refreshments to me. What
And
is the
food
difference?
be
Honestly,
refreshing? I guess some can, but
yeah, I
yeah,
don't know. I
yeah.
don't know. So yeah,
There's a brilliant, some brilliant Thai food at the back of the Tollington as well. So I'm hoping at least that would be still very much on sale. Even have to wait and see. But yes, please, thank you to everyone joining us in the chat box. Charles, thank you to you for coming on. Very much appreciate. Any final comments before we wrap up?
Cheers, Tom. No, thanks for having me on. Just if you haven't pre-ordered yet and you want to pre-order, then get over to my socials. Oh, it's the links below. Obviously, Tom's saying there, but it's also all on my socials. I'm unashamedly plugging it a lot at the moment. So yeah, the pre-order link is there. You'll find it on my Twitter or my X, whatever you call it nowadays. And yeah, pre-order from HarperCollins direct or from everyone else, Amazon, Waterstones, WH Smith, all that lot. And I hope you enjoy it as well. And if you don't, be nice.
It's one of the few times now you can say that my ex promotes my book, because now that's where indeed you're posting your things. But yeah, there's a link down to Harper & Collins Publishers in the link down in the description. You can order it from there, but obviously it's also available at Amazon, Blackwell's Bookshop, all the places, Waterstones, WH Smith's. You can pre-order it and order it off the website through the link down in the description. And as I said before, it's on the screen. But if you want any extra details about the live event, there is also a link to Charles's tweet and post and X accounts, which you can find down in the description as well. As well as that, make sure you subscribe to Charles' YouTube channel. Charles, tell people where they can find you on the old YouTube.
Yeah, it's called Inside Arsenal. It's a channel, and just search for me on there, Charles Watts Inside Arsenal. It will come up. More than welcome your support.
Congratulations on the 90k. Brilliant achievement, mate. And keep it up and keep going. It's fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Lovely stuff. We will see you, of course, tomorrow morning. Very quickly before I wrap up, I did see a quick super chat from Craig. Craig, I'll get in touch with you, but thank you for the kind words about me and Charles. It is very much appreciated. Thank you very much. And thank you, everyone else, for all the kind comments that you've left as well. As I said, we'll see you tomorrow morning, live, bright and early at 8 a.m. I hope you have a fantastic evening, and we will see you again very soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.